There are places in this world where shadows seem to breathe, where whispers carry secrets too dark for daylight. Deep in the heart of Millbrook Valley stands one such place, the Caldwell Estate. Once, this grand Victorian mansion commanded respect from all who passed its wrought iron gates. Its towering spires pierced the sky like accusatory fingers, and its sprawling gardens bloomed with an almost supernatural vitality. The Caldwell name was synonymous with wealth, influence, and power that stretched back generations. But power, as they say, corrupts. And absolute power, well, it creates monsters. Today the estate tells a different story. Paint peels from its ornate shutters like diseased skin. Weeds strangle the once pristine rose bushes, and the fountain in the circular drive has long since run dry, filled now only with stagnant rainwater and the skeletal remains of dead leaves. Yet even in its decay the mansion seems to watch, to wait, as if it knows something we don't. The neighbors remember when things changed. Mrs. Henderson, who lived closest to the estate, would often speak of the oddness that began to settle over the Caldwell property like morning fog that never lifts. At first it was subtle things. How the family's laughter seemed to echo differently at night, how their curtains were always drawn during daylight hours, how visitors would arrive but their carriages would leave empty. But perhaps the most unsettling whisper of all concerned the Caldwell children themselves. 3 beautiful children had once been the pride of the Caldwell family. Margaret, aged 12, Thomas, 10, and little Catherine, barely 8 years old. Golden-haired and bright-eyed, they were the picture of aristocratic perfection, often seen playing in the gardens or accompanying their parents to town gatherings, until they stopped growing. It happened so gradually that at first no one noticed. Years passed, seasons changed, and the adult world aged around them. Yet the Caldwell children remained exactly as they were. Margaret's face held the same youthful roundness it had possessed 5 years prior. Thomas's voice never cracked or deepened. Catherine's small hands never grew to match her height, because her height never changed at all. The townsfolk began to count the years with growing unease. 7 years, 10 years, 15 years, and still, the children appeared frozen in time, their faces untouched by the natural progression that claimed everyone else. Some whispered of miracles of divine blessing bestowed upon the wealthy family. Others spoke in hushed tones of something far more sinister. Ancient curses, unnatural experiments conducted in the mansion's hidden rooms, or perhaps a bargain struck with forces better left unnamed. Mrs. Henderson remembered the day she realized something was truly wrong. She had been hanging laundry when she heard the children's laughter drifting over the estate's stone wall. But the sound made her skin crawl, hollow and mechanical like music boxes wound too tight. The laughter had no joy in it, no spontaneity. It was as if the children were performing happiness rather than feeling it. The transformation was complete, yet terrifying in its perfection. As the years wore on, the Caldwell children were seen less and less outside the estate's boundaries. Their appearances became rare, almost ghost-like. Glimpses of small figures in upper-story windows or fleeting shadows in the garden at twilight. The servants who worked at the estate spoke in whispers of locked rooms on the 3rd floor, of midnight ceremonies that filled the halls with strange chanting, and of lullabies that sounded more like incantations than songs of comfort. One former housemaid, Sarah Collins, claimed she had once stumbled upon the children during what she called their evening ritual. She described finding them in the mansion's great hall, standing in perfect formation around a circle of candles, their lips moving in unison to words in a language she couldn't recognize. Their eyes, she said, reflected the candlelight like mirrors, empty, glassy, devoid of the spark that makes us human. Sarah never returned to work at the estate after that night. The few servants who remained spoke of other disturbing habits that ruled the household. Meals were served at precise times, but the food often went untouched. As if the children no longer required sustenance in the way normal beings did, they moved through the halls with an eerie synchronization, their footsteps echoing in perfect rhythm. At night, their voices could be heard through the walls, not speaking or singing but reciting something in that same foreign tongue Sarah had witnessed. The mansion itself seemed to respond to their presence. Doors would close on their own, candles would flicker without wind, and the temperature would drop noticeably whenever the children passed through a room. It was as if the very building had become an extension of whatever dark magic preserved their eternal youth. Behind those closed doors, something unnatural had taken root in the heart of the Caldwell family. But if the children were the mystery, their mother was the key. Helena Caldwell had always been a woman of striking beauty, the kind of woman who commanded attention simply by entering a room. Her raven black hair never showed a strand of gray, her porcelain skin remained flawless despite the passing decades, and her emerald eyes held an intensity that could make grown men uncomfortable. Helena's obsession with youth and beauty was well known throughout the county. She spent fortunes on exotic treatments, imported rare herbs and minerals from distant lands, and was known to entertain strange visitors, scholars of obscure subjects, traveling mystics and individuals whose purposes were never quite clear. These guests would arrive under cover of darkness and leave the same way, if they left at all. The local physician, Dr. Marcus Webb, had been called to the estate several times over the years. He never spoke publicly about what he witnessed there, but those close to him noticed how his hands would shake when the Caldwell name was mentioned. On his deathbed years later, he was heard muttering about preserving vessels and the price of eternal childhood. His final words, witnessed by his nurse, were a desperate warning. She's stealing their time, stealing their very souls. Helena's study, according to the few servants brave enough to enter it, was filled with ancient books bound in leather of questionable origin, glass vials containing substances that seemed to move on their own, and mirrors that reflected images that weren't always there. The walls were covered with charts tracking lunar cycles, anatomical drawings of children, and formulas written in that same strange language the children had been heard reciting. Her maternal love had twisted into something monstrous, a desperate need to preserve her offspring in their most perfect state, regardless of the cost to their humanity or the lives of others. The darkness surrounding the estate deepened when people began to notice a disturbing pattern. Travelers who sought shelter at the mansion during harsh weather would sometimes never be seen again. Their horses would be found wandering the nearby roads, still saddled but riderless. Merchants who delivered goods to the back entrance reported glimpses of additional children through the windows, children who were never acknowledged by the family, children who seemed to appear and disappear like phantoms. Local records began to show troubling discrepancies. Missing persons reports filed in neighboring towns described individuals whose last known location was the road leading to the Caldwell estate. A merchant's daughter named Emily Patterson vanished after delivering fabric to Helena Caldwell. A young apprentice blacksmith disappeared while making repairs to the estate's iron gates. A traveling scholar was last seen entering the mansion's front door on a stormy October evening. Each disappearance followed the same pattern. The missing person was always young, always healthy, and always last seen at or near the Caldwell property. The local constabulary investigated half-heartedly. The Caldwell name still carried considerable influence, and officials were reluctant to pursue accusations against such a prominent family without concrete evidence. But the terrible truth began to crystallize in the minds of those brave enough to piece together the evidence. The servants whispered accounts of additional children glimpsed in the mansion, the missing travelers, the Caldwell children's unnatural preservation. It all pointed to something unspeakable. The children's immortality wasn't a gift, it was a theft. Each missing person, each vanished traveler, each disappeared child represented stolen time, stolen life force, stolen years that were somehow transferred to preserve the Caldwell legacy in its perfect, unchanging form. The additional children seen in the windows weren't guests or relatives. They were the drained husks of Helena's victims, trapped forever in the mansion as living reminders of her terrible bargain. The Caldwell Dynasty wasn't built on wealth alone. It was built on stolen time, purchased with innocent lives. But all curses exact their price, and all stolen power eventually turns upon its wielder. The final chapter of the Caldwell story began on a winter night when the screaming started. Neighbors reported sounds of anguish echoing from the estate, not human screams, but something else entirely, as if the very walls were crying out in pain. The servants fled that night, running down the estate's long driveway in their nightclothes, refusing to speak of what they had witnessed. By morning the mansion stood silent, its windows dark, its doors sealed. Helena Caldwell was never seen alive again. Some say her obsession finally consumed her, that the forces she had bargained with came to collect their due. Others believe she simply couldn't bear to watch her perfect children begin to age normally, their stolen time finally running out. Perhaps the accumulated weight of all those stolen lives finally crushed her beneath their collective sorrow. The children, however, the children remain. Even now, decades after that final night, locals report seeing small figures in the mansion's windows, children with golden hair and bright eyes, children who wave from upper-story rooms before vanishing into shadow, children who should have grown old long ago, but who remain forever trapped in their youthful forms, prisoners of their mother's obsession, victims of her unholy bargain. The estate stands empty now, officially abandoned, but those brave enough to approach its gates on certain nights claim they can still hear it. The hollow, mechanical laughter of children who forgot how to truly live. Some say they are cursed to remain forever young, forever trapped, forever paying the price for their mother's sins. Others whisper something far more chilling, that they are not victims at all, but willing participants who have developed their own hunger for stolen time. The truth may be buried with Helena Caldwell in the family mausoleum behind the mansion. But one question lingers in the minds of all who know the story. In her quest to preserve her children's youth forever, did Helena Caldwell save them from the ravages of time? Or did she damn them to an eternity far worse than death? On quiet nights when the wind carries whispers through Millbrook Valley, some say you can still hear the answer echoing from behind those darkened windows.